to tell the full story, how things came to be, what went wrong, and hopefully in the panel discussion, what can be done to improve on the systems in the AFP and, well, of course, the values as well. So I'm very proud to say that this book is our latest contribution to the growing literature on anti-corruption. It may be a little known fact, but Newsbreak has already produced 5 books so far. 2 on political ads, selling candidates, and spin and sell. 3 on anti-corruption, 7 deadly deals. It's about the 7 mega contracts under GMA, Shadow of Doubt, and now The Enemy Within. This book is timely because there is a great push for transparency and accountability, and the Philippines sits in the steering committee of the Open Government, now where Secretary Butch Abad is quite active. It's a program, flagship program of President Obama. So it's quite timely that there is great interest in reform and there is promise of reform under the new administration. So on behalf of Newsbreak, I'd like to welcome you all. I know that all of us, or many of us here, have abiding interests in reforming our institutions. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Marites. Now I'd like to introduce the 4 brave and persistent Newsbreak souls who toiled to write this book. They finished, 3. They finished the book, they finished writing in 4 months. Am I correct? Yeah. Let me start with the youngest to, well, the most senior. Gemma Bagayawa Mendoza started writing about the military when she was part of the Newsbreak investigative team that exposed the unexplained wealth of former AFP controller General Jacinto Ligot. After that, she investigated the military's alleged involvement in mining in Mount Diwalwal and the misuse of CAFGU funds. For her chapter in this book, she discovered how tough COA is in terms of access to information. The COA refused to grant her any interview for this book. She also spent time locating, to no avail, retired COA Commissioner Raul Flores, who oversaw defense and military audit. She was also shocked to find out that the Senate and the House never shared documents and notes on military investigations, and that the 2004 congressional probe on military corruption was never documented in one full report. Gemma is Newsbreak's resident budget expert. She loves numbers. She is also Newsbreak deputy editor and writer, and she won the 2nd and 3rd prizes in the 2004 Jaime V. Ongpin Awards for Investigative Journalism. Please stand to be recognized. Aris Rufo, in the back, scrutinized how the AFP spent the reimbursements from the UN for sending peacekeeping forces. For his story on this in Newsbreak, he won 2nd prize in the JVO Investigative Journalism Awards in 2006. In 2008, Aris bagged the 1st prize for the Asia-Pacific region in the Lorenzo Natali Journalism Prize for Development for his story on the killings of judges. He has been covering the courts and the office of the Ombudsman for many years now, and despite all the exposés he has written, how General Garcia got away with it all still came as a surprise to him. We give him credit for the book's catchy and meaningful title, The Enemy Within. Aris? And Glenda Gloria has always had a love-hate relationship with the AFP. The military has given her some of the biggest stories in her career as a journalist, but also her worst nightmares. In August 2005, after exposing ISAF's involvement in the Hello Garci scandal, she received a funeral wreath and threatening text messages. Her own sources in the AFP told her the wreath came from one of them. But this book, she says, is the best proof we have that the AFP is dominated by decent and professional men and women who are aching for change. For her stories on the Comptroller Mafia and disappearance of activist Jonas Burgos, Glenda won the second and grand prizes in the JVO Awards for Excellence in Journalism in 2000 and 2007, respectively. She took a break from writing when she served as COO of ANC from 2008 to February 2011. She returned to Newsbreak as its current executive director. Glenda? Now, Glenda will speak to us and show and discuss the highlights of their book.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm overwhelmed. I just need to emphasize that this is a ceasefire zone. Colonel Abusa, General Morales, this is a ceasefire zone, please. It's a joke. This book, shall we begin? Okay, this book really began in 2004, as what Marites has said, after the Garcia scandal broke and Newsbreak followed it up with an investigation into the wealth and properties of another military controller, Jack Ligot. That was 7 long years ago, when we stayed with our controller and conversion stories, even as everybody else wasn't looking. Imagine then how we felt when Colonel George Rabusa came out early this year, triggering a series of investigations. We simply had to upload our archives online, conversion, the so-called Comptroller Mafia, the Ligot's properties here and abroad, and our interview, the first and only she has granted so far with Mrs. Erlinda Ligot. But being scarred journalists in this country, we knew that at some point all the noise will end and everything will soon be forgotten. Thus this book. Before I proceed, allow me to acknowledge again my co-authors, Aris Rufo and Gemma Mendoza, both longtime writers for Newsbreak. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank those who have helped us in this book project, our Newsbreak family, in particular Marites Vitug, who edited our manuscript, Cecil Santos, Arnold Gueco, Carmela Fenbuena, researchers Rachel Panlaki, and Ray Santos, our book designer Ariel Dalisay, and layout artist Felix Pio. The rest are acknowledged in the book. Let me warn you though that this is not a loud, sensational book, despite its sexy title. Given the deep-seated problems facing the armed forces, we know we've covered only a portion. Because we really wanted to do more than simply expose. We're way past that. We had to ask ourselves, why are we stuck? Who are to blame for it? And what mistakes should be avoided? We wanted to connect the dots between military corruption and civilian neglect, or complicity, because we know that that's the only way we could move forward. And because we know that both sides, the civilian and the military, know that this is fundamental. Civilian supremacy over the military is not just enshrined in the Constitution. We need to live it day to day. But civilian supremacy should also mean civilian competence and integrity. When we started in February to consolidate everything we have gathered over the years, General Garcia was enjoying temporary freedom as a result of the plea bargaining deal he struck with the Ombudsman and the Sandigan Bayan. More than 2 weeks ago, he was rearrested, and this made us feel slightly better. For the general got away with almost everything. While in active service, Garcia was a U.S. green card holder, which AFP rules did not and do not allow. He served the most number of chiefs of staff, 5, thanks to the penchant of former President Arroyo for appointing short-term chiefs of staff, something that we hope President Aquino will avoid. While in jail since 2005 and before the court could order a freeze on his assets, Garcia managed to withdraw 128 million from local banks. Worse, as Aris Rufo writes in his chapter, How the Big Fish Got Away, the general's 135 million properties and deposits covered by the plea bargain agreement were already covered by two forfeiture cases under the court's 4th Division, which was not even informed about the deal. In short, what he was asked to return under the plea bargain deal had already been ordered forfeited by the same court. The general indeed knew how to bargain hard. During Garcia's trial, then Ombudsman Mercy Gutierrez assigned a former Public Attorney Office lawyer who had indigents as clients to handle the case. This is not to belittle the work of PAO lawyers, but only to emphasize the priorities or the lack thereof of the resigned ombudsman. And the prosecution failed to get a single military supplier to testify against the general, which is a pity, since favored military suppliers who had similar office address and set of owners and without track record won big contracts from the AFP under the UN and under the UN reimbursement fund. And so we asked if these suppliers have been blacklisted by the AFP, and if not, why not? The AFP made the UN fund a slush fund. In his time as military controller, Garcia also succeeded in asking the UN to wire the money directly to a private account in Makati. For years, the Commission on Audit never audited the UN fund. Now, at least, the UN funds are now remitted to the Bureau of Treasury. How could this have happened? To skirt budgetary and auditing rules, and in the name of war, the AFP spent public funds on projects, people, and properties that were not budgeted or did not even exist. This gave them room to spend cash for emergency purposes. But what began as an exception to the rule eventually became the norm. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the National Security Advisor, Cesar Garcia. Thank you, sir. The military tapped suppliers who provided them with fake receipts and instant cash. In exchange, suppliers and every signatory to the release of government checks got a cut from each transaction. This is called conversion, and for the longest time, until the abolition of J6 in 2004, it was the controller community that mastered the art of converting paper money into cash. Is this peculiar to the armed forces? This art of using budget for unintended purposes? Secretary Abad would be the first to say, certainly not. Just ask the Supreme Court and his office, who are now deadlocked on how to control and manage a 2 billion personal fund. But that will require another book, Marites. Civilian agencies such as BBM, not under your watch, Secretary, and COA knew this was happening but turned a blind eye. The executive and legislative branches continued to refuse to grant the AFP more budget for its operations. In turn, the AFP used this as justification for conversion, which in essence is malversation of public funds. Yet the AFP was granted additional requests for personal services, even if this was one of the huge sources of converted funds. The AFP, after all, never got to fill up its roster or fully disclose how many are in its ranks. We note in the book that this is precisely one of the legacies that General Oban wants to leave behind, an honest-to-goodness accounting of how many troops the AFP has and how much each of them is actually getting. Partly due to complicity, ignorance of the military's inner workings, parochialism, and sheer laziness, civilian oversight agencies allowed the AFP to convert and misuse its budget. COA auditors assigned to the AFP got so cozy with officers who ended up sponsoring the auditors' travels, golf games, and Christmas parties. And like a bad parent, Congress and the Senate called the military to task only after a scandal. Gemma Mendoza, who wrote the chapter Epic Failure, discovered that nothing came out of the 2004 congressional probe on conversion and the general's unexplained wealth. Not even a report. The committees never examined the reports that COA submitted to them. The same questions and documents asked in the 2004 investigation were again asked this year. It turns out that Congress has no institutional memory. Senator Jinggoy Estrada, who delivered a scathing privilege speech in the 2011 probe, admitted to Gemma that he was unaware of the 2004 congressional probe. Imagine how deeply frustrating that can be. But it isn't all that bad. Several men and women in the AFP have said no and continue to do so, sometimes at the expense of their careers. We've named only a few of them in the book, because if we named them all, we'd be exposing all our sources. So they know who they are. But in the book, we cited 3 officers who have said no to conversion and have in fact opposed and exposed it. And it's been my privilege to have personally met and known each of them. Guillermo Wang, the former Navy chief who was sacked by Angie Reyes, has since retired and is now working in the U.S. Retired Army General Dick Morales, who is here and who now manages a military insurance system. He exposed conversion more than a decade ago when no one cared to listen. Colonel Noel Miano, who is also here, who refused to give incentive pay to his men, even if it was the norm. The World Bank and the DBM have helped the DND AFP conduct a rapid appraisal of its financial systems just this year. In February, they found out that conversion still existed and that the AFP continued to overestimate its cash advances. Conversion was supposed to have been abolished in 2004 in the aftermath of the Garcia scandal. But when General Oban assumed office this year, his first order of the day was still the same as Efren Abu's in 2004, which was to end conversion and end corruption. This is proof that without stewardship and oversight, one cannot defeat the stubborn enemy called corruption. It is important for the AFP to change for the better. The military, after all, is the only government institution that is allowed by the state and taxpayers to carry arms and fire them for their sake. In the remotest areas in the country, the soldiers are the frontliners in conflicts, disasters, difficult medical missions, and in building roads and bridges. But the AFP's principal mandate is to defeat the enemies of the state. And having written this book, we are convinced that it will never succeed in this task if it fails to fight and defeat the worst enemy of all, the enemy within. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenda, for that presentation. At least we now have an idea. If you still haven't bought the book, please buy one of what the book will contain. We now proceed to our panel discussion, which will be participated in by our special guests. But before that, allow me to introduce each one of them. Congressman Joseph Emilio Arjun Aguinaldo Abaya is presently the Secretary General of the Liberal Party. Now on his 3rd term as representative of the 1st District of Cavite, he serves as chair of the House Committee on Appropriations of the 15th Congress. A great-grandson of Philippine hero General Emilio Aguinaldo, Congressman Abaya left behind a promising military career when he decided to enter politics. He was a Navy officer and served as aide-de-camp of then-President Corazon Aquino from 1991 to 1992. He also served as the honorary chairman of the Kabataang Liberal ng Pilipinas. He came to Congress with impressive educational and professional credentials. He graduated from UP Diliman, where he was a university and college scholar. There, he got a degree in BS Electrical Engineering. He topped the entrance exam of the Philippine Military Academy and was sent by the government to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, USA. He graduated with distinction and ranked second among all BS Math graduates. He loved studying so much that he went to Cornell in Ithaca, New York, to obtain his Master of Engineering in Electrical Engineering degree. He was also a recipient of the General Motors Fellowship Award. From engineering, he looked for another field to excel in and decided to go to the Ateneo de Manila Law School, where he obtained his JD Law degree in 2005. He passed the bar while serving as congressman. Please let us welcome Congressman Abaya. Florencio Butch Abad is the current Secretary of Budget and Management, having been appointed in June 2010 by President Benigno Aquino III. Prior to that, he served as campaign manager of the Liberal Party and was one of the campaign managers of then-presidential candidate Noynoy Aquino. He became congressman representing the Lone District of Batanes in 1987 and was re-elected then for another 3 terms from 1995 to 2004. He became Liberal Party President from 1999 to 2004. Before that, he served as Agrarian Reform Secretary under former President Corazon Aquino and as Education Secretary under former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. His stint as Education Secretary was cut short in 2005 when he resigned from his post due to allegations of electoral fraud against Mrs. Arroyo. Secretary Abad obtained his Bachelor of Science in Business Management and Bachelor of Laws from the Ateneo de Manila University and passed the bar in 1985. A fellow of the Edward Mason Program in Public Policy and Management at the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard in Cambridge, he holds a master's degree in public administration. He was a union organizer, trainer, research director of the Ateneo Center for Social Policy and Public Affairs, and a legal and management consultant to different local and foreign foundations. Please welcome Secretary Abad. General Eduardo Oban Jr. is the 42nd Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines after he was appointed by President Benigno Aquino III last March. He is also the 3rd Chief of Staff to come from the Air Force since 1996. A member of the Philippine military class of 1979, he graduated with honors and was the recipient of the Aguinaldo Sabre. He joined the Philippine Air Force after graduation from the PMA. In the Air Force, he was also Assistant Chief of Air Staff for Operations, or A3, and Commander of the Air Defense Wing and 1st Air Division. He likewise served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Programs, or J5, of the AFP, and was Commander of the Air Force and Deputy Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces prior to his appointment as Chief of Staff. General Oban obtained a graduate degree in Business Economics from the University of Asia and the Pacific. A fighter pilot, he took the Air Command and Staff course in the Air Command and Staff College, where he graduated at the top of his class. He also completed the Joint and Combined Staff Officers course at the AFP Joint Command and Staff College. He likewise attended the International Defense Management course in Monterrey and the International Flight Safety Officer course in Kirtland, USA. We are honored to have no less than the Chief of Staff, General Oban. Dr. Orlando Mercado is a diplomat, former senator, and Secretary of National Defense, a veteran broadcaster, Professor of Political Science, Communication, and Business Management. Dr. Mercado obtained his Political Science, Master of Arts in Communication, and Doctor of Philosophy and Political Science degrees from the University of the Philippines. After a career in broadcast, the longest of which was with GMA7's Kapwa Ko Mahal Ko, I'm sure you all remember that, he was elected as an opposition member of parliament in the first regular Batasang Pambansa. He sought a seat in the Senate which he got in 1987 and 1992, serving 2 consecutive 6-year terms. In 1998, he became the first civilian head of the military establishment in more than a decade. He instituted a reorganization program in the Department of National Defense to assert civilian supremacy over the military. He exposed the corrupt practices in the administration of the armed forces, pension, and veterans funds, and also introduced the first online electronic procurement system in the Defense Department. In 2009, he was appointed as the first permanent representative of the Philippines to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Jakarta, Indonesia. He is, at present, Secretary General of the Eastern Regional Organization for Public Administration, which is based here in Manila. Please welcome Dr. Mercado.